God will never forgive you for anything because God has no reason to forgive you because nothing you could do or say could possibly hurt, injure, anger, damage, frustrate, or annoy the most powerful force, the most powerful energy in the universe. Any more than a 2-year-old child could, anger or disrupt you at the dinner table by doing something, even if it was done deliberately to get attention. You don't turn to the 2-year-old child and say, "It's okay, darling. Grandpa forgives you." Because Grandpa knows that forgiveness is not part of the equation. Because Grandpa understands how a 2-year-old child could act that way. And God understands how we could act that way because God is pretty clear that most human beings, not all of us, but many of us, are acting like 2-year-olds at the dinner table, demanding attention and doing something inappropriate if we don't get it. So because God understands why we are behaving the way we are behaving, God has invited us to embrace with clarity that particular tool as we interact with people. And so God said to me, "Neale, understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master."
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Neale, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, what I've been offered and invited to share with the world. So I appreciate it. Thank you. How can I serve you today?
I love that. And Anne-Marie, thanks for joining me as my co-host. So what an honor to have both of you on, and I look forward to learning from you and listening to you. As I told you before when we recorded, when I was new on the path, and you have a new book called Letters to a Young Seeker, I would love for you to break down how do you define a seeker? Because a young seeker could be someone at 33 years old or 69 years old.
Yeah, precisely. A young person or someone who's young at heart. I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. But how I define a seeker is someone who is searching for many answers to life's questions. Who am I? Why am I here? How can I make the most of my time here? What is my soul's purpose? What, if anything, is God's agenda? What are some of the larger truths about life? And are there any principles in life that can make the whole process easier to move through? So I think a seeker is someone who is simply seeking answers to those questions. And so, we read a book here now and then. I know you don't read very many. I only see 6,542 books in the background on your shelves. However, I don't see any of my books on the shelf, which is interesting because I'm searching the entire bookshelf and I don't see one of my books on the shelf. So goodbye. Sorry, I couldn't stay with you. Oh, well, whatever. How can I serve you? Other than sending you a couple of books to put on your shelf, what else can I do?
I don't know if you remember what happened to me was when I had my awakening. I remember going to Target, and I felt like everything got dark, and there was a DVD staring at me, and it was Conversations with God, and that's how I found you. And then that changed my whole life, and I got your books. I have a number of your books in the back, but yeah, it changed my life, and for that I'm truly grateful. But being a young seeker, after my awakening, I went to a church, and I remember hearing, "He doesn't know what he's preaching." So I got up out of the service and I walked to the gift store and I asked for your book, Conversations with God. And they looked it up and couldn't find it, and they opened up a list of books, and it was on the no buy list, which, this was all new to me. I didn't know the difference from organized religion to spirituality, or, I didn't know there was a difference, so yeah, I thought that was very interesting. It really opened my eyes. Even Gandhi was on the no buy list. I was looking for Gandhi books at a local church. And this was a fairly big church. It was a huge one. It had a big gift store with a bookstore. But why is questioning religious interpretation of God such a no-no? Why are we conditioned to not question anything?
Well, I think I said the why that we are conditioned that way is that it allows certain groups. People tend to group up, on this planet. We group up by religion, we group by economic status, we group even by gender sometimes. We group up by political points of view. We group up in places called nations. So I think that groups tend to need or want to control the members of their own group and to get as many people into their group as they possibly can. Not because they're nefarious, not because they have, ill intent, but because this is the way they've felt that they must behave in order to survive. I think we have a misconception about our purpose in life and about how we can survive as long as possible, and in our bodily form. So I think that's the answer to the question. Why is it such a no-no to question, really any group, not just religion? It's a no-no to question certain political groups in the world. And if you question a certain political group, you could be retributed against, so to speak. You could be targeted and made wrong. So groups tend to make it difficult to question their dogma and their teaching, whether it's a religion or a political party or simply a social organization, because that's how we've learned to survive. Don't question what I have to. Oh, and by the way, just so you understand how that works, don't you dare question a thing I'm saying in this particular interview, or I'm out of here and you'll never hear from me again, and you'll be hearing from my attorneys.
Neale, I just wanted to say,
I can't talk to women. Women do can't even question. I can only talk to. It's a male-dominated society. Oh well, all right. Wait a minute, just a second. What? What's the problem? I should talk to a lady as well? Okay, all right. I've been given permission to talk to a woman. Go ahead.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Earlier, while you were threatening to go away, I had myself on mute, and I wanted to just show you that I have your book here, and I took ridiculous, copious notes and stickies. The 3-volume set was a gift to me last year, and I had never read it before, and so I'm just so excited to be here talking with you today and to tell you how much this assists me. Just this morning, I was at a Course in Miracles study group, and one of the gentlemen that was there was just talking about this very thing. He was talking with someone who happened to be Roman Catholic, and he said to this gentleman who I guess underwent a conversion, and this gentleman just only wanted him to believe his point of view. And the fellow who's in A Course in Miracles said, listen, I'm happy to discuss with you. I'm happy to talk with you. But this is not a two-way conversation. This is a one-way conversation. Why do you think that people want to just clasp on to beliefs so very, very much nowadays?
Because it's the only way they feel they can control their experience.
Mm.
If we can't grasp onto our beliefs and declare them to be absolutely, positively so, this is what's true about everything, then we feel lost. And yet, even more today than I want to say 30 or 50 years ago, because today we are being assailed by information that's coming to us from 100 different sources virtually every day of the week. The internet alone is bringing us information from source after source after source after source, and we're able to access people's ideas about life, politics, religion, spiritualities, social issues, sexual issues, all sorts of financial issues. We're being assailed with information all the time, Anne-Marie. And so we have to find a way to make our way through this forest of information. We're lost in a forest of information with 1,000 trees. And so we attach ourselves, as many people do, to a set of beliefs. They can then say, well, in spite of all the other information I'm receiving, some of which agrees with me and some of which does not, but I don't have to worry about trying to figure it all out. I know what my beliefs are. So we search for beliefs now more than ever because we want, here's the word, stability. We want philosophical, moral, spiritual, psychological, emotional stability. We're tired of all the upheaval. So that's my observation and my answer to your question. I could, of course, be wrong, but I haven't been wrong about anything since 1957.
Neale, in book 2, in Conversations with God, you're talking to God, and God says, return to spirituality, forget about religion. Why forget about religion? Because that's going to anger some people. Some people are going to get angry with that statement.
Well, I think that the advice we're given is that religion is a series of dogmas, doctrines, basically ideas about morality. And here we go again, about philosophy, psychology, sexuality, ideas about, really, frankly, everything. And it wouldn't be so difficult if we had only one or two or 4 or 5 religions to have to deal with, and we could just choose which one feels most true or most valid to us. But in fact, on this day of our life, there are 4,223 religions being practiced on the earth. I didn't make that number up. You can go to Google and ask how many religions are currently being practiced on the earth. Not from the beginning of time, but on this day. 4,223 at last count. Faith traditions. And guess what? They all have different doctrines. They all have different ideas about certain things. So we've got to try to figure out which one of the 4,223 religions is the one that contains what we call the truth. And it becomes a very difficult thing to try to decide. So that's why the world is the way it is. And that's why I was told, don't necessarily look at religion, look at spirituality. Look at what spiritual truth brings to your awareness. And spiritual truth, my experience, Garcia, is that spiritual truth in the world can be summed up in 2 words: pure love. If the information you're receiving, if the idea that you're being given cannot be described as pure love, then it may not be worth holding on to and believing, may not be worth including in our beliefs. Because in my understanding, that which we call God, the highest power, is simply pure love, defined as pure love. That is a love that needs, expects, requires, and certainly demands nothing in return. My friend, most human beings can't even love the person on the pillow next to them in that way. We can't even honestly say to the person on the pillow next to us, the person we're sleeping with and sharing life with, most of us can't even say to that person, I love you, no matter what. No conditions, no requirements. I have no needs from you. Nothing that I demand of you, of course. Nothing even that I expect from you. I love you simply because of what I see across the room, not from what I can get from you, but from what I see across the room. That's enough. That's all I need. So that's my answer to your question. Why are we being invited to step aside from organized religion? Because there are 4,223 of them. But spirituality is summed up in one simple statement. God is pure love. God loves us without condition. So I've learned how to turn to the person on the pillow next to me and say, darling, I love you no matter what.
Mm. Thank you. That was so beautiful. Now, you wrote this book with your wife. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Can you describe how that came about?
Oh, I'd be happy to. It's my wife's idea. My wife, and she describes this on her webpage, but she talked about how, she was really honoring in her heart a book that she read 30 years ago called Letters to a Young Poet. And I think Maria Rilke was the person who wrote it, who wrote a bunch of letters to a young poet. And he published the letters that he got from her because he was inspired by her poetry. And my wife said to me, this is now several months ago, but she said to me one day, I woke up thinking, a few nights ago, I woke up thinking, and I got the idea in my head, letters to a young seeker. You should take all the information you've been given in your conversation with God, reduce it down to something that can be absorbed and embraced and grasped, very briefly, a very thin book. Don't make it a thick book. Make it something really simple. It's just a series of simple letters that describe what you feel is important in terms of what God has said to you in your conversation. I said, honey, that's a wonderful idea. I love it. And so I did. I wrote 21 short, very brief, very to-the-point letters to young seekers, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or even people young at heart in their 60s and 70s, because you don't have to be, chronologically young to be young at heart. So I wrote these 21 letters, and I said to my wife when I finished, what do you think? By the way, it didn't take me 6 or 8 months to write that. I think it was done in about 8 or 10 days, just a little over a week and a half. And my wife said, this is really wonderful stuff, sweetheart, but it feels a little logical. It doesn't have a lot of heart to it. It has a lot of wonderful points, things that people can really expand their awareness by looking at. There's not a lot of softness to it. I said, yeah, I hear you. The messages from God are not always read the softest messages. And then I said, could you add some of your poetry to the book? My wife is a published poet. She's an award-winning published poet. And so she said, I would be happy to if you would help. I said, I think it's exactly what the book needs. So she looked through her collection of poems. She must have written, I would say, easily 150 or 200 poems, many, many, many poems. And she picked out the poems from her collection that she felt expanded the messages that I was putting in my letters and expanded them in a unique way. So what we wound up with was a book with letters, and following each letter is a wonderful poem that turns a message that opens the mind into magic that opens the heart.
Mm.
Because that's exactly what her poetry does. So yes, we co-authored the book, and that's how it came to pass. And, I told someone in the publishing business about it, and they said, "Oh my golly, we're putting this book out. Send us the manuscript." And so we did, and the book has been published very, very recently, just a few days ago.
I love that. How do you define the Word of God? I mean, we're often taught the Bible's the Word of God, and then you hear like the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. But John of the Cross said something beautiful. He says, every creature is a Word of God.
Yeah, how I define the Word of God is the truth that sings in my heart, that feels true. That, again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but the word that feels like it's expressing pure love. If the word is expressing pure love, it's coming from God, because that's what God is. God is defined in my world as pure love. God's love is not a transaction. It's not transactional. God doesn't say, "I love you if." God's love is not a quid pro quo. I'll give you this if you give me that. God says, "I love you no matter what, because you're my creation, and I placed a bit of myself in every single one of you, each of you, all sentient beings in the cosmos, not just here on Earth. All sentient beings in the universe, in my understanding, are individuations of divinity." And so, how do I know what's God's word? Does it sound and feel like pure love? If it's transactional, if it's "I love you if," it's probably not coming from God. It's coming from a source that seeks to control.
I love that. And I love how you break down the difference. And I'd love for you to break down the difference between forgiveness and understanding. We're often taught to ask God for forgiveness.
Yes, and I've said to groups that I've spoken to, and I'm frequently invited to speak to a group at a house of worship, a temple, or a synagogue, or a church. And I will often say to those congregational members, "God will never forgive you for anything." And the place goes crazy. People's eyes cross in the front row. And they even start to get up and start to leave the church or leave the temple. And I say, "Well, wait a minute. At least give me a chance to explain. Then if you want to walk out, fair enough." So the objective people say, "Okay, okay." And they sit back down, and I tell them, God will never forgive you for anything, because God has no reason to forgive you, because nothing you could do or say could possibly hurt, injure, anger, damage, frustrate, or annoy the most powerful force, the most powerful energy in the universe, any more than a 2-year-old child could, anger or disrupt you at the dinner table by doing something, even if it was done deliberately to get attention. You don't turn to the 2-year-old child and say, "It's okay, darling, Grandpa forgives you." Because Grandpa knows that forgiveness is not part of the equation. Because Grandpa understands how a 2-year-old child could act that way. And God understands how we could act that way, because God is pretty clear that most human beings, not all of us, but many of us, are acting like 2-year-olds at the dinner table, demanding attention and doing something inappropriate if we don't get it. So because God understands why we are behaving the way we are behaving, God has invited us to embrace with clarity that particular tool as we interact with people. And so God said to me, Neale, understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And that's one of the 21 lessons that I put in letters to a young seeker so that they could really grasp and embrace a new way to interact with people who have done things that have hurt or offended them.
Can you expand on that in light of what is happening in the world today with the revelation of egregious acts made by people that we once trusted? How can you offer people the opportunity or explain forgiveness on that level?
We don't forgive. We simply understand. So I say to people who are having a problem with certain experiences today and with certain people today, I say to them, can you understand? Is it possible for you to understand how or why that individual would behave the way they're behaving? And almost always the person said, well, I can understand. They were raised that way, or they were mistreated as a child, or they had to endure this, that, or the other, or, whatever reason. And most people have at least a cursory understanding of why others behave the way they behave, speak the way they speak, and do what they do. So once we understand, we can abandon forgiveness. I call that forgiveness foregone. We can forego the need to forgive. Now, that doesn't mean that we condone, or that we approve of, or that we hope that it will continue any particular activity or statement that a person has offered. But it does mean that we understand how it could have happened. And you know what? I had to use that on myself. I've done some things in my 20s, 30s, and 40s that I'm frankly not proud of. I hurt some people.
Mm-hmm.
I hurt my first wife, who's passed on. She's no longer in the physical realm. But I hurt her deeply. I had an affair while we were married. Like, what was I thinking? What in the world was the matter with me? Because she was a perfectly wonderful human being. But I had to look at myself in the mirror and find a way to still love the person in the mirror. Warts and all. Misbehaviors and all. Mistakes and all. I had to find a way. And I realized if I could understand, that doesn't mean justify, but it means if I could understand how it could have happened, how I could have behaved that way. It helps me to embrace regret in place of guilt.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, guilt and fear are the only enemies of man. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross taught me that, and I never forgot it when she said it to me. Neale, guilt and fear are the only enemies of man. Replace guilt with regret. It's not the same energy at all.
Neale, I don't think you believe in a devil. Do you believe in a devil or an evil force? If there is no devil,
his name is Garcia, and he wears headsets, and he asks incredible questions that he dares me to answer. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. What's the matter? I shouldn't use humor that way? Okay, whatever. Okay, no, I don't believe in the devil. I was told in my conversations with God that there's no such entity as the devil or Satan. And that Satan is kind of an acronym, Satan, seeing anything as negative. So there never was, You know what's interesting, Garcia? Many religions claim that God created everything. Nothing was created outside of God's realm. That everything was God is the creator. Now, if that's true, then religions would have to say, well, God created everything except the devil. Because the devil, but wait a minute. Most religions teach that the devil was once an angel that gone bad. An angel, that was what I was taught by the Catholic Church, that Satan was an angel gone bad. He wanted to be as powerful as God, and so he took a different pathway and became what we've come to call the devil. We made the whole story up. I was told in my conversations with God, we simply made the whole story up. There is no devil, and there is no place called hell. Hades does not exist. There is no hell, there is no devil. Now, if I'm wrong about that, I'll be meeting the devil in hell. But someone once said, all the interesting people are there anyway.
From a spiritual lens and having conversations with God, what's going on in the world right now? Labeling God's children as illegal aliens, all these snatching up family members and taking them back to a different side of a border. How do you think God looks at this from your perspective, having conversations with God?
Well, let's be clear. Certain people, I don't want to get myself in trouble on this, but certain people are not simply labeled illegal aliens. They are, in fact, illegal aliens. Excuse me. They just came into the country and ignored all the laws. They said, I don't have to obey the laws. I can just walk into the country and get what I want and do what I want. And so they are, in fact, excuse me, illegal aliens. So the question is not whether they're called illegal aliens. The question is, whether they're inaccurately called illegal aliens. The question is, what is the best way to deal with the challenge? Not just in this country. We're not the only country on the planet that has an influx of people that have crossed the border without obeying any of the rules and without acceding to the rules of that particular society into which they have entered. They're just not wanting to be registered citizens in that country. So the question is how to deal with that. That's the question. How would pure love deal with that? Would pure love interact in the way that some interactions have occurred around the world, in this nation? And when I say this nation, I should tell people I'm talking about the United States, which is where I'm talking from, and other countries as well. So we need to ask the question, what would pure love do now in the face of the challenge being created by, frankly, illegal aliens?
We just talked about A Course in Miracles. Talking to you, like, how do we do that with love? Do we need more conscious leadership? Or do we need to raise it or live off of that spiritual principle of love? Or do we follow man-made laws, which is kind of falls away from love? How do we balance that all out? I think it's a challenge for us as human beings.
Yeah, and there's no one answer fits all, every situation. But if we are looking for what would pure love do now in every situation, the answer will be clear to us internally. And then we would respond that way.
Yeah, thank you. Pivoting on that same point, do you believe that God, in A Course in Miracles, and that's what I practice, and that's why I mention it all the time, this earth is generated by our own personal thoughts, by what we hold within us. Are you in agreement that we have like a reflective universe going on, that what we are experiencing is just the culmination of all the pent up frustrations that we hold within us
I
reflected?
do, I do think that is a huge part of it. I was told in conversations with God, Neale, what you most often think about, you most often bring about. What you think about, you bring about. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Our frustrations, our anxieties, our limitations, imagined limitations, our anger, often misplaced anger and unjustified anger, has generated too many of our behaviors, collectively and individually, from my observation. I've tried very hard to eliminate that in my own life. I've tried, done my best to change my own behaviors so that my behaviors are not informed by and created by those negative energies, anger, frustration. Even if I am frustrated, even if I am angry, there ought to be a way that I can express those emotions because they're real. I'm not going to pretend that I never get angry, or I'm never frustrated, or I'm never annoyed, or I'm never hurt by anyone. I won't make those statements because they'd be bold-faced lies. I do experience all of that. But how do I react when those energies assail me? I move from reaction to creation. What's interesting? The word react and create are the same words. Only the C and the R I've gotten misplaced. When I take the R off the beginning of the word and put the C at the front of the word and place the R elsewhere, then I have the word create rather than the word react. And so when I put the letters in their right place, I see who we really are. And so I've replaced reaction with creation. And when I experience negativity coming up inside of me, I ask myself, what aspect of my divinity do I choose to create now as part of my response to what I'm now experiencing?
In conversations with God, you talk about abandoning the concept of separation and adopt the concept of visibility. Can you touch on that?
Sure, but I'm not going to because I'm angry with you. So, too bad. Oh, okay. I often wonder, though, if interviewers ever ask a question and the subject of their interview says, I have no idea what the hell I'm supposed to respond with. Well, what do you do? What do you do when a person has no answer to your question? But, yeah, I actually forgot the question. That's what, if I talk enough, I can forget about the whole question altogether. Separation when?
It was about you talk about abandoning the concept of separation and adopt the concept of visibility.
Not just the concept of visibility, but the concept of unity.
Mm-hmm.
The very first message I received in my conversations with God, in over 3,000 pages of dialogue, chapter 1, book 1 of 9 dialogue books, contains the first message I ever received. We are all one. So separation and individualization are not the same thing. We can be individual without being separated from each other. When God told me that, I said, I don't understand. How feels like if we're individual, that we're not all the same. God said, I didn't say you were all the same. I said you were all one. Hold up your hand. I said, okay, whatever. God said, are your fingers individual? I said, yeah, they're individual. They look different. They function differently. They have different purposes. God said, are they separate from each other? I said, well, no, they're connected to the same hand. God said, oh, and the hand is part of the body. Oh, I see. So even though they're individual, they're not separate from each other. Therefore, you are all fingers on the hands of God. So separation and individuality are not the same thing. So I've helped people to understand that if we treated each other as if they were part of us, that we are all one, we would change the human culture virtually overnight. But you know what? We've been offered that advice for a couple of thousand years. I mean, the guy told us 2,000 years ago, do unto others as you would have it done unto you. Simple and wonderful invitation. I probably haven't answered your question directly, but that's what came up for me when we talked about separation.
Appreciate it. Me and Anne Marie were talking before you got on, and I remember one of the questions we wanted to ask you was, when Yeshua says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes to the Father except through me, there's been more division and from that statement and misunderstanding. How do you interpret that verse? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me.
I think it's misquoted. I think that what he's attempting to communicate was humans cannot find their way back to the prime source that we call God, except through the embracing, the adoption, the demonstration of behaviors that fulfill our true identity as individuations of divinity. So I think that what Yeshua was saying is exactly what Mahatma Gandhi said. Mahatma Gandhi put it in a very simple sentence. Be the change you wish to see in the world. So we were invited to be the change we wish to see, or we're not going to see the change we wish to see, which is another way to say you're not going to get back to the place that you call heaven if you continue acting as if you're in hell.
Mm.
Even when you go to the realm of the spiritual, you will, if you're not careful, deny what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, unless you don't. I'm hoping that all people, all the souls that ultimately return to the realm of the spiritual are so filled with pure love, so filled with the light, if you please, to use a metaphor, that they come to clarity about who and what God is, about who and what they are, and about what is meant when a person says, you cannot get to where you want to go unless you behave in a way that takes you there. You know, if you're driving west in the United States and you're heading into, toward the Pacific Ocean, and you get into California in the middle of the state, and you want to go to Seattle, you won't get to Seattle by turning left and going down to San Francisco. That doesn't make turning left wrong. Doesn't make it morally wrong. It simply makes it ineffective. It's not the way to get to Seattle. I think that's what Yeshua was saying. It's not the way to get to Seattle to turn left and go to San Francisco. It's not the way to get to where you want to go, to a place of eternal love and paradise, to behave in the way that many of us are behaving. So he wasn't saying, only if you follow me. He was saying, if you follow my example. That's what he meant by follow me. Not claim that I'm the only way to get there, but follow my example. So I reject the notion that some religions teach that if we aren't belonging to a certain religious persuasion, we're going to hell. I don't think that God said to us through Jeshua or anybody else that all the world's billions of Muslims, the world's millions of Jews, the world's millions of Hindus, the world's millions of people who are not belonging to a particular religion are going to hell, even if they believe in God, even if they're generous and kind and caring and compassionate and sweet and understanding. No, I don't think that God says that. I don't think that God says you have to belong to one particular religion in order to come home to me, which is why I wrote a book called Home Was God.
Mm.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was just telling Booboo before, like he said, my son came to me, and I grew up in a Catholic family. I was actually a cantor for the Catholic Church for most of my life. And he said to me, well, Mom, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I told him, I was like, he didn't mean it that you have to do through him like a gatekeeper, but more do what I do as I do.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. So we're in agreement. Now,
and when people ask me, by the way, when I say that to people, some people might say, well, what does that look like to do, what he did? And then I'll say to them, well, I can give you a couple of examples. If a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. If a man steals your coat, give him your shirt as well. If a man demands that you walk 1 mile with him, go with him twain. And raise not your fist to heaven, and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that exact thing, turn the other cheek, was rolling through my mind as you were talking earlier. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because it also shows that there's no separation, we are all the same. Now, your book is Letters to a Young Seeker. So is this meant for young people, let's say, younger seekers, or is it meant for everybody?
It's meant for those who are chronologically young, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, for instance, and for those who are young at heart, who are young enough, even if they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s, to continue seeking answers to life's biggest questions. So really, it can be read by anyone of any age, for the young and for the young at heart.
I appreciate that. That's something I needed when I had my awakening, because I was new to all this stuff and there was no one to really talk to. So I really appreciate you coming out with this new book. I look forward to reading more of it. And really quick, how do you define, like, what's the purpose of the soul? Do you believe in reincarnation? What has God told you about the purpose of the soul's journey and reincarnation?
Well, I think reincarnation is very real. I think that people reincarnate, but not because they have to. I don't think it's forced. I do not believe that any soul is required to re-enter the realm of the physical once they have left that realm through the process that we call death, which doesn't really exist. Death is merely a change of address. We just move from the realm of the physical to the realm of the spiritual. But once we're in the realm of the spiritual, it's my understanding, and I was told in my conversations with God, that once we're in the realm of the spiritual, we are given the opportunity, the invitation, to return to the realm of the physical if we wish to move forward with the agenda of the soul. And I'm told that the agenda of the soul is to demonstrate, to fully experience our true identity as individuations of divinity. That the soul yearns to not only know, but to experience who it really is. The example I like to use is, it's one thing to know that I'm generous. I think I'm generous. I think I'm a generous person. I'm generous with my time. I'm generous with my talents. I'm generous with, what I think I understand about some things. I'm even generous with my money, frankly. I give to charity and so forth. So I think I'm a generous person. But if I want to not just know that I'm generous, but to experience myself as generosity, then I have to place myself into a contextual field where such an experience becomes possible. That's why I reincarnate, to move forward to the next level in the evolution of my soul, so that I can not only know who I am, but experience and express who I am.
I appreciate that. More and more people are having near-death experiences, and they talk about a life review. How do you look at all that?
Well, I've had a near-death experience, and so my understanding of it is not for me theoretical, it's experiential. When I had a near-death experience, I simply saw myself as being outside of my body. And I moved through all the experiences that my body generated in life, and I recontextualized them so that I could understand how it could have occurred and make a decision on whether I ever want to repeat those behaviors again. I'm not sure if I answered your question directly, but that was my experience of my near-death encounter.
Can I ask you also then, from what you described as reincarnation being a voluntary thing, then does that kind of eliminate the story of karma?
No, I don't think that karma requires that we reincarnate, but I think that if and when we should reincarnate, we often do so because there's something from a past experience, I want to say a past life, that we wish to encounter again, maybe in a new way, in order to move forward in the process of our evolution. So, do I encounter some of the same temptations, challenges, and even failures that I encountered in a previous life? Yeah, I do. Is it karma? You could call it karma if you want to call it that. I call it opportunity. An opportunity to accomplish what I came back to the physical life to accomplish. To redo the way I encountered those moments before, and to recreate myself anew in the next grandest version of the greatest vision ever I held about who I am. So yeah, there's karma. As soon as we come into another physical experience, I think we are going to be greeted with many of the physical experiences of a previous lifetime in a new way, and we'll have an opportunity to change our mind about who we are and how we want to respond.
I think it was book 3 or book 2 where you talk about Buddha, Krishna, and Jesus as spacemen. Do you believe there's other types of life forms? Did God tell you in Conversations with God? I believe that was Conversation with God number 3, where you talk about more life forms, other lives, other planets.
I don't think I call them spacemen in the common vernacular of the words. I don't think they were like, creatures from outer space. So they weren't spacemen in that way. But I think they were souls that had entered physical bodies. Souls that had been living in a different realm from a different, and came to this realm from a different place. Some people feel that they've come to Earth. Some people living today, not just the people you mentioned, but people living today often will say, I came from another planet. And I lived up there, once I got to tell you a little story. My darling wife and I were lying on the back porch, looking up at the night sky. It was a very clear, beautiful night. You could see all the stars. And a little tear came to my eye, rolled down my cheek, and my sweetheart said, "Honey, what's making you cry?" I said, "I'm looking up at the Pleiades, and I'm homesick." She said, "Homesick? You too? I feel I came from there." They had in other words, had a previous lifetime there. I said, "I don't have any doubt in my mind." So when I look up at the Pleiades, I feel homesick. And so, does that make me a spaceman? No, not in the way we use the term spaceman. But does it make me an entity that may have had a previous life off of the Earth and somewhere else in the universe? I think that all of us have, or certainly many of us, have had previous lifetimes elsewhere in the cosmos. And sometimes we remember them, and then we write it off. We say, "Yes, that's my imagination. It's my imagination." But, I have learned not to write it off. I've learned to consider the possibility that there's more going on here than meets the eye. Which is, by the way, the first message in Letters to a Young Seeker. There's more going on here than meets the eye.
I love that.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss all of this with you guys. Enjoyed my visit with you as much this time as I did the last time. And so I appreciate these moments that we have shared.
We appreciate you, and thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your wisdom. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to just qualify. I don't consider what I've been saying to be my wisdom. I'm not a very wise person based on my own actions and my mistakes. So I don't think it's Neale's wisdom, but is it wisdom that I was given to share? I'll embrace that notion. So you can thank me for sharing the wisdom that I was given to share, that I was invited to share. Because all I did was take dictation. I took down the words that I was hearing in my mind. I took down the words that made up my conversations with God. And then I shared what I was told with all those whose lives I touched. So I don't want people to think that I think that I'm a person of great wisdom. I'm not. Anyone who knows me can tell you that.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I've appreciated both of you. Anne-Marie, was there anything else you wanted to say before we conclude our time together?
I just think it's wonderful that you're a starseed like so many of us here.
Nice way to put it, starseed. I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks to both of you guys. I appreciate, again, the opportunity for us to share time together.
Take care.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.